So, oh,
There you go.
got it. I guess I can click this, got it.
So Linda is going to say a few words to one of our members in recognition of her work. So Linda.
Yes, so I'm the so-called long-standing old member, member advisor of PSSA, and I'm also sort of the unofficial archive person. So for this, what happens when you get old, and you've been around so long, but you have some memory of members and what members have done over the years. And I was thinking about Lois Yoshida, who has been such a great help during the pandemic by learning all the technology to pass along teaching Shodo particularly. And I know she also has Sumi classes through Zoom as well. And then I was thinking about her really long time service to PSSA as the education chair. And I said to myself, I wonder how long she's actually been doing this. And so I looked through old directories, and Lois began doing the chairmanship of our education program in 2006. 2006, that's a lot of years. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the different programs that PSSA has had over the years, I'll just mention the education. And so for years, we would take Sumi classes to schools. So any kind of schools, teachers could ask to have an introduction of Sumi to their classrooms. And we built up traveling boxes that have all the supplies that are needed to take into the classroom, so the teachers didn't have to worry about anything like ink, brushes, cups, paper, all of those things. And it was a primary part of our mission over the years. And then Lois would, get volunteers to go into the different places and organize all the supplies. It's really quite a thing, which all got interrupted, of course, during the pandemic. And so I thought to myself, I think it's time to recognize Lois for her long-term dedication to the organization, to Sumi, to passing it on to people. And why not now? So I'm going to give her, or PSSA is going to give her a gift, and I'll describe it before I hold it up, because Sally's going to have to tell me what way to hold it, because I won't be able to see the screen. But anyway, this is a beautiful calligraphy, framed calligraphy piece by our teacher, Mary Bottomley. And Mary Bottomley was the one who did the PSSA Shodo classes from the very beginning. She was one of the founding members of our group, and along with Fumiko Kimura and Ann Inoue. And so Shodo teaching was a benefit of membership right at the very beginning. And so once a month, Mary taught these classes. And then, of course, Lois was one of her most devoted students. So this is a painting, calligraphy painting. I call it a painting, but it's actually a calligraphy piece, kanji, and the kanji is Yama for mountain. So I'll just hold it up, and at some point, Lois will hopefully be happy to receive this into her home or studio. So excuse me a minute.
Lois, we love you.
Yeah, thank you, Lois, and I hope you enjoy this. Hope it won't be long before we get together. Okay, so how does that look?
Just a little higher.
Okay.
A little higher, just a tiny, there we go.
Okay.
That's amazing. Wonderful. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Well,
Oh my
thank
goodness.
you, Lois, for all that you've done for us, both in education and in our wonderful monthly Shodo classes as well. Thank you, Celinda.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you,
so much.
Lois.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Oh my gosh. I have to say,
Whoop, hold on.
Oh,
Okay,
I just wanted to thank Celinda too. She was a great role model. I took education over from Celinda. So she was, quite an inspiration to follow. And I just appreciate everyone's dedication and interest, commitment to both Suya and Shodo. So it's just wonderful to share those passions with all of you. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you, Lois. Thank you.
Okay, Dorothy,
Yes.
do we know where our presenter is?
I have just resent him the link, and I'm sending him a text right now, and I'll be right back with you.
Okay. Well, we have a minute or two here. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions about what we blew through in our meeting, or something for the good of the order while we're waiting?
Are we having an in-person meeting in December?
Yes,
Okay.
we are having on December 6th. We're going back to Zoom in January, and we'll continue on Zoom indefinitely. But December 6th, we are coming together at the Asia Pacific Cultural Center in Tacoma. Probably the last time we'll meet there before they close for their renovations, for our silent auction and scholarship fundraiser. So
Ah,
We need
Sally.
to, we need,
Yeah,
we need
I
to
thought you
get
said-
everything, we need to get everything out of the locked closets there too, because I belong to PGA and we're also there. And
Oh.
they're going to let us have storage at the new place.
oh, good.
But we need to get the stuff out for Puget Sound Sumi artists that we have there, stored there.
Okay.
So I'm confused because I thought in the board meeting, you said we weren't meeting in person. So we are meeting in person?
We are meeting in person just in December.
Okay.
6th. Then we'll go back to Zoom and our regular programming in January.
I
So-
have a lot of stuff in my living room that was donated, and for the auction, is there somebody that can help me bring it to the meeting?
You're in Tacoma, right?
Right, I'm in Chris.
So anybody else in Tacoma can help NOLA bring those items to the meeting? Now, are these major items, NOLA, because we're also having a larger auction?
From Sheila Scott.
Oh, from Sheila. Okay,
And it's a lot of stuff.
okay.
So, and somebody transferred it into my house, and I've got a really bad back, so I can't be hauling everything.
Okay, well, I'll connect with you at
Okay.
some point, and we'll see if we can't get you some help
Yeah.
to get that to the meeting. So any luck, Dorothy?
I haven't heard anything back from him. Did you have some problem getting that Zoom meeting started yesterday?
I didn't, but I think he did.
Good.
He
Okay.
had trouble getting in. So,
Hi, Sally.
yes,
You said that the big silent auction is coming. When is it? What is the date on that?
the bigger auction,
Mm-hmm.
we haven't set a date yet, but we were
Okay.
thinking that might be a good summertime activity.
Okay.
And we have a lot of work for the auction at my house, at David's house, and in addition to Nola. And then Sheila Scott has another carload of things that need to be.
I think the carload is what is with NOLA.
No, this is an additional batch, that she's moving to Arizona at the end of the year. So she needs to have a place for her donations to go. My suggestion is to rent a storage unit and get all of this stuff put there. And what we can do now in December, take that back out, and what we can do later, arrangements for that. I'm going to try to call Michael.
Okay, I'm
Okay.
gonna mute you. I'd like to try to figure out-
An empty room where we could store this rather than renting a place.
Well, we'll explore that and we'll see what we can come up with. And I'd also like to, I mean, there's going to be some wonderful stuff here, people. Should be a pretty good enticer to get you to the meeting, but people like Judy Walker, who is down in Florida, and Judith, who is down in the Bay Area, and other members who live elsewhere. I'm going to see if I can take my computer to the meeting and somehow set it up so that you can participate. I don't know what this looks like yet because we haven't done one of these hybrid meetings before. But if you're interested in exploring some of the gems that might be there that you would like to bid on, we can certainly do that. And this is going to be mostly supplies, small pieces of artwork, the smaller items that we'll put up for bid to benefit our scholarship. And then we'll have the larger one. We've had some beautiful large donated pieces that we can put in a bigger auction later in the summer. So I'm really sorry about this. We had a little trouble getting Richard into our tech check meeting yesterday too. So I'm thinking that maybe, okay, hold on.
Dorothy has a message.
Unmute. I muted you, Dorothy, so you have to unmute. Well, it sounds like she's talking to him. So, other thoughts? Gosh, I wouldn't have had to blow through the meeting as quickly as I did if I had had known that we were going to have a little bit of extra time.
I'll make a little announcement then here. Right now, the Pacific Gallery Artists is having a show November, December, and to the 23rd of January at the Unitarian Universal Church in Tacoma. So we have a show Julie just put up.
For 3 months?
Yes.
And where is that location?
It's on 56, and I can't remember what the cross street is, but it's on South 56th Street, the corner of South
it's
56th.
not far from Asia Pacific Cultural Center then, right?
No, it isn't too far from there.
3 minutes.
Great.
3 minutes, Sally.
3 minutes?
Yes. So maybe if there's anybody at the meeting that has storage space, maybe you could talk. So they could let us know.
Yeah, we can have Lisa put on her headdress that she wore to or picture that she wore to the board meeting this morning. And again, I will take this opportunity to welcome those of you who are visiting the meeting today. We usually, move it along pretty quickly, not like this. This is just one of those technical difficulty times, unfortunately, for those of you that are visiting. But I hope you won't hold that against us.
And it was Michael, not Richard, who had technical difficulty yesterday.
Oh, it was?
But yeah, it was Michael, not you. You just said Richard.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant Michael.
Michael, our president.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So he said he'd be online in 3 minutes. So we're at less than 3 minutes and counting down.
Alrighty. Well, this is we can build up hype for this presentation now, right?
Right. So I can tell you that Michael is recognized nationally and internationally for his creation of haiku-related poetry, as well as his mentorship and collaboration with groups worldwide. And his haiku has appeared in hundreds of journals and in 22 languages. And he was even the keynote speaker for the 2013 Haiku International Association conference in Tokyo, and his poetry was read there. And closer to home, Michael has provided a lot of information for the Haiga group, as we've been learning about haiku and its related forms. Tanrenga, he helped us when we were putting together our little books a couple years ago, and has been available for quite questions on anything haiku related, provided answers to us for that. Closer to home here, Michael is the director of the annual Haiku Northwest Getaway at CBEC, which PSSA has participated in for the last 10 years. And his program for us today is in two parts. First, he's going to give a short, just a minute, short
Message is received from Michael Dillon Welch.
Okay, a short presentation on the astrology sequence in Chinese mythology, and then a dying art presentation of Jisei and end of life poems. It looks like I need to send him the link again. So I'm going to go put myself on mute, and we can talk about anything else until he shows up. Just a moment.
Okay, well, that was a good introduction, and it was nice to have that chance for you to introduce him like that. So I will come back to you here. We're just sort of jumping all over the board. And I was thinking about something I could mention, and it went away as quickly as it came. So, anybody else have something they'd like to mention? Well, I can, since I didn't spend time on this, I can tell you that our 3 shows coming up in 2023 are May 1 to June 25th at the Mercer Island Community Center. Nice big venue there. June 1 through July 31st, Puyallup in their Premier Gallery. And the 25th of September through the 8th of December at Tacoma Community College in Gig Harbor.
And Michael is in the meeting now. Thank you.
Oh, good. Where is he?
Well, I'm not sure, but he said he's
There he is. All right. So, Michael, I am going to spotlight you. Dorothy gave a lovely introduction already. So I think we can probably, I'm going to make you a co-host. And also, hold on just a second here. Participants. Just a sec. Now I need to find you over here. There you are. Okay. I'm making you a co-host, and now I can say, welcome. We're looking forward to your presentation today.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience in awaiting my arrival. I think I need screen sharing
I just
enabled.
made you a co-host, so you should be able to.
There it is. Okay. All right.
And everyone, if I can ask you, if you're not already, if you would mute yourselves and save some questions toward the end, then we can diminish the amount of noise we have in the background and give Michael the floor. Okay, go ahead.
So can you see my screen?
Yes.
So I'm going to begin with a haiku sequence about the 12 zodiacs of Chinese zodiac symbols. And this was recently published, republished in an anthology called This Morning's Tides by the Commencement Bay Haiku Group in Tacoma. And it has rabbits in it, which I think is relevant to some plans you have this coming year. So, Year of the Rat. I should also add that each verse, each haiku in this sequence also includes a flower that's relevant to the year of zodiac. Year of the Rat. 3 African Violets by the Mended Violin. Year of the ox. Peach blossoms left in the letterbox. Year of the tiger. Glow cineraria, misty moonlight. Year of the rabbit. The unfinished painting. Purple jasmine. Year of the dragon. Bleeding heart, fallen to the mantle. Year of the snake. Yellow orchids for the election winner. Year of the horse. A pair of calla lilies nodding in a vase. Year of the goat. A red carnation, journalist's lapel. And the juxtapositions here are sort of leaps. What does one have to do with the other? And that hopefully the uncertainty of that, the mystery it creates, hopefully engages, and perhaps you'll find a connection. Perhaps it's easier for some of the verses than others. Year of the monkey. The encyclopedia opens to chrysanthemums. Year of the rooster. Talking so much in the garden, she misses my gladiolas. Year of the dog. Rose bushes hiding, garden gnome. Year of the pig. Abundance, hydrangeas.
That's great. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. And now we'll switch to my other presentation. Moment. Shut up. So this presentation is about jisei, or death poems. In the Japanese tradition, if one knows one is about to die and has the presence of mind to write a poem about dying or summarizing one's life or just commenting on whatever, this was commonly done by monks, poets, and samurai. And I want to say something about how this presentation came about, because I think it's interesting. And it also is the source of the illustrations that you'll see, which are, I will say, energetic and suitable for the spooky season. Supposedly ended last night. I don't know. Or Day of the Dead is just around the corner. If any of you are familiar with NFTs, this is art you can buy online. It stands for non-fungible token, which is not a helpful word. But if you buy a Picasso, you could hold it in your hand if it's small enough and hang it on the wall. That's fungible. But if something's non-fungible, it means you can't do that. It exists only online, for example. And people online thought, well, it would be nice if you could sell this and retain ownership separately from just making a copy of a JPEG or whatever. And through something called the blockchain, another unhelpful term, it is possible to document ownership of digital art. So people have this huge community online where people are selling NFTs, sometimes for very high prices, where you can own that piece of art, even if somebody makes a digital copy. You are considered the owner of it and can sell it and so on. And sometimes it's an investment. And it's tracked, the ownership is tracked on what's called the blockchain. So I was contacted about a year or so ago by an NFT company that was trying to offer a set of new NFT art pieces of artwork featuring samurai portraits in a creative way. And they were releasing 8,888 of them, and each one had a portrait. There was a different headdress or different facial features, different armor, different other details, and in many combinations, including a death palm in the background done in Japanese calligraphy. And there were 20 of those palms, and they varied. And so all the combinations and permutations of the variations made up all 8,888 of these images that they offered. And I was asked by the NFT company selling this, called Big Head Club, if I could do a presentation on death haiku. Now, yes, they also wanted a workshop on how to write haiku, the history of haiku, and a general overview of haiku. And then the culmination would be to talk about the jisei, the death haiku, and its connection with samurai. So that's where all of this came from. And this was the extra work that I had to do to make this happen. And you get to see that today. One thing that's puzzling, though, is once I asked to see all the poems that were going to be used so I could better understand what they were doing. And as part of this presentation, they sent me all the poems, and I immediately saw, as you'll see in this example image here, it's quite energetic. In the background is the calligraphy of the poem. It's actually not a haiku. They thought they were all haiku. They're all actually what are called waka. The modern term for that is tanka. And unlike 575, the 575 used in Japanese haiku, waka and tanka are 57577. So these are actually longer poems. But I didn't talk them out of me giving them a haiku presentation, fortunately, and they continued. I don't know how they've dealt with this misunderstanding on their end, because what they're calling haiku are actually waka. Waka is an old term for the modern form of tanka. So I put together this presentation and began by covering key haiku targets, which I'll do here for you today. And of course, the idea here, something to think about is
Uh-oh, we're frozen. I think
collage and present poems that commemorate someone in that way. They wouldn't necessarily be jisei, because I'll explain why, but they can at least be an artistic means of commemorating a loved one or a friend. So the key haiku targets is that haiku is a brief genre of brief poetry, which form is just one part. In other words, if you write 575 syllables, that's a choice, but that's not the only choice. And it's actually a lot less important than some of these other targets listed. Uses objective sensory imagery, so things you can experience through your five senses. It's really important. Makes it very personal and immediate. And it has a two-part structure, equivalent to what the Japanese call a kereji, or cutting word, that deliberately divides the poem into two parts. And in English, the two parts immediately create a question. What does part A have to do with part B? And you saw that in the Xing Shao sequence that I started with. I named the year of the whatever, and then I leap to something else. So that's an attempt to create the two-part structure in in haiku. And it's usually two parts, never three. Sometimes it's actually just one part. That's perhaps more than we can discuss today. Haiku also benefit from having a season word called kigo, and I suspect a lot of you have already heard some of these things about key haiku targets. But because there's a seasonal word, haiku is often thought of as a nature-oriented poem. But I would point out that they have catalogs of season words in Japanese, and about a quarter of the season words are actually not nature at all. They're human-oriented. And then you can discuss, well, are humans nature or not? It's another discussion. But about a quarter of words are not nature strictly. And the really real target for haiku is not nature, it's seasonality and the ephemerality of seasons. So if you do seasonal haiku and perhaps artwork to go with it, it's the season you're trying to focus on, not necessarily nature. And that's what helps to define something as a haiku. So when people say haiku is a nature poetry, well, not really. It's actually aiming at the seasons, which is often nature, but not limited to nature. And of course, and a very important thing about haiku is it's an intuitive implication of an emotion. And when I teach haiku workshops, I will show a poem and then I'll ask frequently, how does this poem make you feel? That's really the point of the haiku. And it's a moment of vulnerability. We write a poem, we share it with somebody, say, this matters to me, does it matter to you? And in that moment, we're vulnerable. And what we write about can be a point of vulnerability as well. But if somebody says, oh yeah, I've experienced that, whether it's funny or serious or sad, whatever it is, when you recognize something that you've experienced, share in that vulnerability, and you have an intuitive emotional reaction to it. You share that. And it's sort of like if you've ever been to a comedy club, when the comedian tells a joke, or it doesn't have to be a comedy club, it could just be any speech. So often, notice this, when somebody tells a joke, you start to laugh in response, will often turn to the person beside you because you're sharing that laughter. And you're also kind of looking for validation. You know, is this funny just to me or to others too? So again, a moment of vulnerability, but you share that. And I think haiku has a similar effect, that want to know, it's sort of a validation of human experience. So that's what goes on with haiku. I'm going to be talking about haiku here, but the larger subject is jisei, which is death poems, which are not necessarily only haiku. But in each case, there's a lot of these targets are going to be there, and many of these poems are about the author in some way, written at obviously a crucial moment in their life. So I have some questions, and if you want to, I can't see everyone at the moment, but you could wave if you like. I have some questions for you. First, another one of these. There'll be quite a few more of these, all slightly different. So, to think about the tradition of jisei, think about, have you ever had someone close to you who has died? Pretty much all of us have. So we are tuned into the intensity of the emotion in this kind of experience. Have you seen a dead body? Perhaps fewer of us had that experience. I first saw a dead body when I was about 16 years old in a traffic accident. And maybe some of us have seen people in open caskets and in other situations, and we're in a hospice. And it's sobering and intense, emotionally intense. And we confront our own mortality when we see this too. So neither of these are death, they're not death haiku, if you wrote about this. Death poems, jisei, are not about these subjects. They are about the self, not others, and oneself dying. And so it's a very different focus. there's a concept of death awareness haiku, but those are not jisei, not true death poems. So traditional death poem could be a haiku or a tanka or a longer poem. They varied a lot, or there's variations of this. Something deliberately, an artistic expression deliberately created just before one expects to die. Obviously, a jisei is limited to poetry of some kind, but there may be other expressions as well that are not necessarily poetry. And a related form is something called zeku, which is a last poem someone happens to have written before dying unexpectedly. It is not considered a true jisei, but it still carries a similar import. And if you somebody of any age, if they happen to write a haiku and then they passed away in a car accident, say, suddenly that poem just takes on more impetus. It's sort of like famous last words. There's an anthology, a book of last things people said. They just take on more import. But they're not true jisei because they're not written with the expectation when one is about to die. Basho, the famous poet, haiku poet in Japan, however, said that all of his poems after a certain point were death haiku because he wrote them, he claims to have written them as if each one was going to be his very last poem. And there's something to be said for writing with that kind of intensity. Or creating any kind of art with that intensity. But technically, except for the very last ones, I wouldn't consider them to be true jisei. But the spirit of the death awareness was certainly, it certainly permeated this writing and the writing of many other haiku poets approach it with that intensity. So again, a true jisei is usually written as a deliberate last poem. So that's what we're going to explore today. And this is a extension of that. I want to point out quote something from Suzuki Shosan, who died in 1655. He abandoned his samurai upbringing to become an independent Buddhist monk. He said that the most important thing with Buddhism is to look straight at death. That is the entire doctrine. That's perhaps an extreme statement, but this idea of Buddhism, point of it is to confront death, contributed to this awareness, self-awareness of death expressed through poetry. And these haiku, not just haiku, but death poems generally, were frequently written by samurai who faced death on a daily basis on the battlefield, and they would write a death poem and go into battle. And if they died, then the poem commemorated themselves. Or if they didn't die, well, then they could live to write another one later. And they had this tradition of writing these death poems before battle, and they also come with historical contexts that are fascinating to study. Their examples seem to have spread to others who wrote death poems, but they were mostly written by poets, monks, and samurai. There's recent years, there's definitely plenty of exceptions, but also perhaps they're not written as much as they used to. I don't know, or they're not recorded, or they're recorded only by family members, and that's the end of it. So, another friendly samurai. Following death haiku, I'm starting with haiku in Japanese, and then I'll have a section in English after that. Then very short at the end, there's some resources, which we can also share with you. So all of these translations from the Japanese section are from Yoel Hoffman's Japanese death poems, which I highly recommend for anyone interested in this subject. It's the definitive book on the subject. So we'll start with Basho, who's the Shakespeare of Japan, Japan's most famous haiku poet. And as you see each person's name, you'll see when they died and the age they died. And it's sometimes interesting to see how young some of them were, and also how old some of them were. even 200 years ago, sometimes they were dying at age 90 when you'd think the life expectancy was much younger than that. But various ages, it's interesting to know we go by, but I won't mention most of them. So this is Basho's, considered to be Basho's death haiku. Ill on a journey, my dream wanders on were withered fields. So he's acknowledging his illness, but is saying no matter what happens to him, his dream, and this is interpreted typically as being his dreams for more people to write haiku. His dream wanders on over withered fields. And yet it's ambiguous enough that it could be any dream. Whatever one's dream might be, it's given space in this poem to continue on, even as the fields may wither. The dream is positive despite the negativity of a withered field. So you can see the two parts in this poem as well. Ill on a journey. It's one grammatically separate part, and then the rest of it is another part. My dream wanders on over withered fields. The withered fields is a seasonal reference. And there are several poems, later death haiku, that actually allude to this one. And here's one immediately by Anonymous. Locked in my room, my dreams goes wandering over brothels. And so you can see why it's anonymous. Banzan. Farewell. I pass as all things do. Dew on the grass. And at the top, it'll say death haiku or perhaps near death haiku or something else or zeku. So pay attention to that, even if I don't always mention it. This was considered to be his death haiku. And he uses the image of dew, which is a common Buddhist image for the ephemerality of life. Again, confronting death. Everything is so short-lived. He's saying goodbye, and everything he accomplished in life is just dew on the grass, and which is a little depressing, but it's also very accepting of reality of life. It's try to accomplish things, but 100 years from now, what does it matter? That's really depressing. But yeah, in the Buddhist sense, it's all dew on the grass. Choa. This is one poem people won't dispute. The Winds of Winter. So you can see the two parts. You can see the obvious seasonal reference. And in this poem, there's some humor because even back then in 1715, when he died, haiku poets were debating haiku. Is this a good haiku? Or how could you improve it? Or whatever. And people would dispute haiku just like they do today. But he's hoping that maybe they won't dispute his death haiku because there's usually a lot of more respect for death haiku. You tend not to dispute. Setsu. Autumn gust. I have no further business in this world. Again, the seasonal references and the two-part structure is evident. The image order, just if you're interested in the translations, Aki no Kaze is kaze is wind, Aki is autumn, no is a possessive, so autumn wind is sort of what it's saying, but it's last in the poem. But the translation from Joel Hoffman reverses that order. Kaku, 92 when he died. Empty cicada shell. As we come, go back, naked. And the cicada comes up as a repeated image for death, the cicada shell especially. And he's also referring here to, when you're born, you're naked. And there's also a ritual of first bathing of an infant. And there'll be another poem later that refers to this, I believe. And he's also referring to when you're dead, you're may be naked again. And there's also a ritual bathing of the body after someone dies in the Japanese tradition, or at least at this time. So that's part of what he's referring to. Fukyu, a bright and pleasant autumn day to make death's journey. Here's a one-part poem. It doesn't have the cut, the two parts in juxtaposition. It's telling us that he's about to make death's journey, and he seems to be pleased that it's a bright and pleasant autumn day, which is that sort of awareness at the time when one is about to die. It's really amazing. It seems to be a poem of gratitude as well. He's grateful for this situation. Gensho, a graveyard. Autumn fireflies, 2 or 3. So we have the setting, and in Japan, fireflies are considered a summer seasonal reference. So he has to qualify it to say that they are autumn fireflies. So we know that they're not summer fireflies. And of course, in the autumn, there's very few left, just 2 or 3 in this case. So even the disappearance of the fireflies echoes graveyard setting, dying, and of course, becomes a symbol for Gensho himself, who's about to die. He's among the last few fireflies. This graveyard setting. Hakurin. Well then, let's follow the peal of the bells to yonder shore. So the bells are ringing him home, sounds like, and he realizes he's about to cross over that other shore. Okusai. We have a famous artist, and also his poem is feels like an allusion to Basho's poem earlier, his dreams wandering over withered fields. Now we have summer fields. Now, as a spirit, I shall roam summer fields. So it's perhaps a more positive take on Basho's poem by dwelling on summer instead of the witheredness of autumn. But in both cases, the spirit, the dream lives on. This, of course, is Hokusai's most famous piece of art, The Great Wave. Issa, he was one of the 4 great masters of Japanese haiku, and he had a very difficult life, house burning down, his wife dying, being kicked out of the house when he was a teenager, stepmother hating him, children dying, just a very difficult life. But he managed to write many positive poems identifying with small creatures often. He's very, very loved as a haiku poet in Japan. And this is a death haiku from him. What matter if I live on? Tortoise lives 100 times as long. And he's exaggerating, because that's not really true of tortoises. But it sort of has that expectation that it lives so much longer. And he's putting his own life in perspective, that other things live longer than he does. And what does it matter? Again, he's confronting the ephemerality of life. He also wrote another death haiku. From one basin to another, stuff and nonsense. The basin he's referring to is the wash basin. Again, that washing, a ritual washing of an infant, and again, after someone dies. From one basin to another. A to B, birth to death. It's all stuff and nonsense. He's sort of dismissive, yet recognizing the ephemerality of life. Of course, so many of us feel differently. Certainly in the West, we try to dwell on accomplishments, but in the Buddhist tradition, as accomplished as many people often are, they also recognize, I can generalize here, often recognize the nonsense of it all. What does it amount to? Again, depressing, but whatever. What he's really talking about, when we see on a gravestone, we'll see the birth year, a dash, and the death year. And of course, the life is in that dash. But he's saying it's all stuff and nonsense, and let's, accept it and move on. This is a zeku. So it was the last poem known to have been written by Joa, who died unexpectedly, and I forget the story why, just to know. And what he wrote, second month, I wear a new bamboo hat and go home. And by second month, he doesn't mean February, he means the second month in the lunar calendar, which is roughly March or April, or I think it spans March and April. So the new year used to be February. But he's just describing, hey, I got a new bamboo hat. Go home. And it could just be he went shopping and he walked home. That's it. But as a zeku, if this happened to be the last poem he wrote, it suddenly becomes different in meaning. Like going home is crossing to that other shore. And what is the new bamboo hat? He's putting on a new existence as somebody who has died. Or at least this is how it's possible to interpret a poem like this in the context of dying. And, if he'd lived another 10 years, we wouldn't interpret the poem quite that way. But we do because of the situation. To give an example of zeku in English, I'd like to mention a poet named Kat Creighton. I run National Haiku Writing Month, and we have daily writing prompts all month long. And the official month is February, but we actually have prompts all year round for the community on the Facebook page. And Kat was prompter for January of 2014. And that month, I also started a new thing to interview the prompters. And I had posted her interview somewhere around the 12th of January. And 13th or 14th, there was no prompt from her. And I'm sorry, I'm speaking. The 16th or 15th, there was no prompt from her. And people wondered what was up. And then a few days later, we found out that she had died suddenly of natural causes. I don't know how old she was, but I believe around 60 something. And it was just a traumatic time for everyone who was expecting her prompts and had been enjoying them that month. And then all of a sudden they were gone. And then we became aware of the last poem she posted on Facebook. It was this: 3/4 moon. Impossible to distinguish what is, isn't. And I think the poem becomes chilling when she completely not expecting to die. And this is the last poem she wrote. She also created photo haiga by combining poems with photographs. And this was the last photo haiga she created. In one breath, all that was taken and all that remains, which becomes chilling, again, in the context of her sudden death. And even the on duty sign lying over on its side becomes sort of a metaphor for dying, no longer on duty. So yeah, this is the kind of thing that an example of a zeku in English, and we'll have more jisei and zeku in the later in the presentation. But to continue with the Japanese poets, Kafu. If I must die, then let me die before the winter comes. In other words, winter is too harsh. Let me die before then. So it's just imploring. And notice the person's age 36, so relatively young. Saigyo, famous poet from the 12th century. I pray that I may die in spring beneath the blossoms under that second month's full moon. So again, a poem of longing, of wishing to die in a particular time. So yeah, famous poet who influenced many other poets after him. Oriya Senan, Bury me when I die beneath a wine barrel in a tavern. Luck, the cask will leak. So some humor here, and this is a tanka or waka, like the previous poem. After that, so you can look at it again. This is a waka, presented in 5 lines in English, and this poem is also waka, or it might have been called tanka by this time, or because it's more humorous, there's another word called kyoka. So lots of terms to keep up with. Kyoka because it tends to be more humorous. But I appreciate that many of these death poems are not afraid of humor, of making fun of oneself or of something else. Kedo, the cuckoo's voice is all the more intriguing as I die. Cuckoo is another repeated image used in death poems. And the cuckoo is also, it's sort of like if you hear the cuckoo's cry, it's associated with death frequently. And Shiki, another of the great masters we'll see later, his pen name of Shiki refers to the cuckoo, and it coughed blood. It is said to have coughed blood, and Shiki himself died of tuberculosis, coughing blood, hence his choice of that pen name. So the cuckoo here becomes intriguing to this poet as he's nearing death. Kiba, my old body, a drop of dew grown heavy at the leaf tip. This is perhaps my favorite of all these jisei from the Japanese poets. This image, this beautiful, amazing image of course, dew, ephemeral life. His whole life is just a drop of dew. Here it is grown heavy at the tip of the leaf, and it's about to fall. But for the moment, it hasn't quite fallen yet. But this is a symbol for his old body and the ending of his life at age 90. Kizan, when I am gone, will someone care for the chrysanthemum I leave? A selfless poem. He's more worried about his plants. And not just his plants, but anything that they may symbolize, such as his friends, family. Will someone care for the things I love? It's an amazing sentiment to share when it's about to die. Koju, and if I do become a spirit, party's over. Again, a touch of humor, at least in the translation here. If he does die, he's sort of saying that life has been an enjoyable party of sorts. Now the party is over. Mortake, today my life is mirrored in morning glory. And what he's implying is that the morning glory is very ephemeral. You know, it'll uncurl its little tangly vines and then be gone. And it's very, very brief in its flowering and the sharing of its beauty. And today, its life is like the morning glory, it will soon fade. Nakamichi, at the crossroad of my life and death, a cuckoo cries. Again, the cuckoo cries. Rangai, I wish to die a sudden death with eyes fixed on Mount Fuji. In the Buddhist tradition, Mount Fuji, because it was the tallest mountain in Japan, was considered the most sacred mountain, closest to heaven. And it's not just the physical mountain that is the issue here, but the idea of being focused with one's eyes and spirit on the spiritual ideals represented by Buddhism, symbolized by Mount Fuji. So that's the overtone that readers would get from this poem. Seisa, my body, useless as the last persimmon on the tree. You've seen persimmons in Japan. If they're not harvested, all the leaves fall. Just one persimmon left, shriveled and useless. And it's a stark image. You see them on persimmon trees. I presented this this talk at the last weekend's CBEC Haiku Getaway, and after the talk was over, someone in the audience said that these persimmons left in the tree are also called ghost persimmons. So the idea of becoming a ghost when one dies, that kind of spirit, ghost persimmons. I thought that was an interesting thing to know. Cheeky. So we're returning to that, the fourth of the great masters. The loofah blooms and I, full of phlegm, become a Buddha. And he's got tuberculosis. He's coughing up blood frequently. He lived the last few years of his short 36 years of life bedridden. Very difficult life for him. And yet he's conscious of the loofah blooming. And this is what a loofah looks like before take out the insides and make scrubbing brushes out of them. But he's conscious of the loofah blooming and recognizes that his phlegm-filled life, this is the moment that he will become a Buddha and transition to the next world, next life. Shuho, cicada shell. Little did I know it was my life. That shell is just a symbol for his entire life. Whatever his accomplishments might have been, it's just a cicada shell when it's all said and done. Tonko. For 58 years, I've had my fun with moon and flowers. And obviously, he's referencing his age. Moon and flowers is not just the moon and flowers. It's actually an idiom for the way of poetry. So he's saying, I've had my fun. The poetry life. That's the overtone of the phrase here. And this is the last one from the Japanese section. Toko. Death poems are mere delusion. Death is death. So a very matter of fact, accepting conclusion, I think, to the set of poems here, which have been in alphabetical order, actually, if you hadn't noticed. But this is a fitting one to end the Japanese section on. Death is death. So now I want to talk about some English death haiku. And this also includes poems that are death awareness haiku and not strictly jisei or death haiku. So this is a haiku about death by Gary Hotham. It's about experiencing somebody else's death. After her last breath, others take a breath. So this is not a jisei, but I presented and a couple of other examples here to show contrast how this is not a jisei. It's still about death. Is this a death haiku? Kamala Babushi? Writing my death haiku in invisible ink. So this was published in 2020 and she's still alive, so technically not a death haiku yet, but about death haiku. Robert Epstein. Not yet a death poem. Morning Glory opens. So yeah, the Morning Glory is opening, but it hasn't closed yet. And he's also the editor of an anthology of death awareness haiku. So he's been giving this idea a lot of thought. And he recognizes that death awareness haiku are not the same as jisei. Is this a death haiku? Sherry Hunter Day. Smoke plume. A death poem visible from space. What does she mean? How is a smoke plume a death haiku? Is this smoke from Auschwitz? I mean, that's something that I think of. And how could this be visible from space? Visible by who? So it's a bit of a mystery here. So, but ultimately, this is about death poems, not a death poem itself. Susan Spooner. I like the humor of this. Estate planning. I get my death haiku out of the way. Get it done. And this is something I've written a friend sent me this picture, which is a funeral picture from India from 100 years ago, where the deceased person, the family gathers around the deceased person for a last photo. And a friend sent this to me and said, write a poem in response to this. And I came up with April Fool's Day, my death poem, still unwritten. So again, not a true Jisei. Margaret Green, a Zeku. This is the last poem known to have been written by this person before she died in an accident of some kind. Snow-covered sundial, waiting to tell time again, which I think is a marvelous, marvelous image. Just think of that faith that a sundial has even under snow. It will be able to tell time again when the sun comes out and melts the snow, perhaps in the spring. Larry Gross, a near-death haiku. Suicide haiku, tossing it from the bridge instead. Not a true Jisei, certainly sobering about death, possibility of death. Langston Hughes, Suicide's Note. Calm, cool face, river. Ask me for a kiss. I take this to be fictional, since I believe he lived quite a bit longer after this. Allen Ginsberg, famous beat poet. This is the last poem he wrote. And it might be a haiku. It's short, 3 lines like most haiku, but it's more of a commentary. And that takes it a little away from haiku, but here it is. To see void, vast, infinite, look out the window, the blue sky. Alan Watts. Some of you may have read some of his writings about Eastern religions and philosophy. He was very popular in the 60s and early 70s, still is today. And in what seems to be a new haiku written for his autobiography, In My Own Way, toward the end of the book, Watts describes visiting a particular Buddhist temple in Japan, where he climbed a long uphill path, then offers the following verse that feels for all the world like it might be a Jisei or death poem. So I'm adding that meaning to this poem, but it sure feels like this. It comes near the end of his book. This is all there is. Path comes to an end among the parsley. I call this a death haiku at the top, but is it? I don't know, but it feels like it could be. Helen Russell, she died at age 101. She was a member of the Haiku Northwest group, and much beloved by our members. And this is the story of her last poem. Helen had asked that her hospital room furniture be arranged to her liking. She complimented the nurse on the bed's comfort and then asked her to bring paper and pen. Helen dictated her last haiku of her Jisei, passed away. First night, new digs, arranging furniture I no longer have. So although she is arranging or asked for the furniture where she's now living be rearranged, I think she's thinking about furniture of where she used to live. And in her mind, she's rearranging that furniture too. No, it's no longer hers. And here she is in new digs. So there's just a bit of humor here. And it's perhaps not as profound as some or moving as some of the other ones. But yet there's still this loss. Furniture I no longer have permeates the poem. This picture was taken on her. I took this picture on her 100th birthday. It's a party that many of us attended in her honor. That's why she's wearing the tiara. Bernard Lionel Einbach. The silence between the lightning, thunder, everything waits. That moment of suspension between one part and the other, between the transition of living to dying, I think is the metaphor he's applying here. For that moment, everything feels like it's. Marianne Bluger, she died at age 60 of cancer. Last ember dies, Chill takes the house by moonlight. So she's referring to herself as the last ember dying. And she's concerned about the chill that will be in the house that her husband will still be living in after she died. Jerry Kilbride, he was a dear haiku friend. And this is his last poem, very deliberately written as a jisei. Terminally ill, had prostate cancer. When I was a kid, I tried to count all the stars. Of course, you feel that sense of loss that, well, he couldn't do that. It was impossible. There's too many stars. But he had the idealism as a kid that perhaps he could. Something subtle about this poem is that, unlike a lot of the other poems that are not 575, this one is. Yet it's 575 very naturally. And it's like Jerry to make a nod to the Japanese tradition of 575 pattern, even if it's not syllables in Japan. So he's has this sort of background nod to Japan and the form he chose for this last poem. Jane Reichold, she's written many books about haiku, including a complete translation of Basho's haiku and a book called Writing and Enjoying Haiku that many people have been influenced by. She was very ill toward the end of her life, and it was increasing pain. She chose to end her life by jumping off a cliff along the Pacific coast, California. This is the last poem she published in a weekly column that she wrote for the local newspaper. Blue sky, words I cannot say, small clouds. And whether this is a true jisei or not, I don't know. There may be ones that the family has after this last one published just a few days before she died. But if this is a zeku or a jisei, it certainly takes on added weight, knowing that she is about to die. William J. Higginson is the author of the Haiku Handbook, which is still the most important book about learning haiku craft and aesthetics and history, written in English. And he died of cancer at age 69. This weekend, actually, I think it was last weekend, 12 years ago, whatever, how many years ago that was, 14 years ago. He wrote a haibun, which is a mix of prose with haiku, and this was written 8 days before he died, referring to how he became connected with haiku. Well bucket nightfall or new day. Well bucket nightfall is an allusion to a Japanese writing. Is this then to be the journal of my own well bucket nightfall when my own life will be snuffed out in a few weeks' time? Or is it the journal of a dark night to a bright new day? I have lived a long and productive life to my own understanding, lived much of it on my own terms, much on the pure dumb luck of some accidental word or event no one could have predicted. Who could know that a single verse spoken in an endless year of USAF Japanese vocabulary drills relating to parts of weapons, flying airplanes, lead to a lifelong interest in Japanese poetry that has sustained me through all the rest. Here's his last poem. Smell of bile. I waken to October afterglow. About a week later, instead of a few weeks, he died. Johnny Bransky, he was a regular at the Seebeck Haiku Getaway that we just had this last weekend. This is not a death haiku, but it's a poem that he sort of alludes to in what was his death haiku. We'll see in a moment. Long before I came, long after I leave, blossoming pear. And after he died, the poem was engraved on his gravestone. Long before I came, long after I leave, blossoming pear. And when he was dying, he had emphysema and had a breathing apparatus, so he couldn't talk. But he asked for a whiteboard to be brought to him, and he wrote his death haiku shortly before asking for breathing apparatus to be removed from him so he could die. And this is his last poem. One last breath before dying. Plum blossom. And the emphasis on breath is not just, the way it is for everyone, but for him, with emphysema being on a breathing machine, that one last breath was directly a reference to his illness. One last breath before dying. Plum blossom. Vincent Trippi. Please spread my ashes round and round in the cabbage field. Full moon. And the round and round reference feels like it's a dance, that he's almost asking people to dance in celebration of his life. This poem was found among his papers after he died. Tim Russell, Snoozles. The little dog knows I'm toast. So I love the humor of this. His dog must be called Snoozles. And he's just referring to himself as becoming toast. The idiom of, things are over. The humor and presence of mind to write in this way is remarkable. Carol Purrington. I had the privilege of visiting her once in her home in Massachusetts when she was 6 years old. After a few months of school, she came down with polio and lived the rest of her life either in an iron lung or with a breathing apparatus to keep her alive. And she hardly grew after age 6 or 7. She remained very tiny, and she lived her life on her back, the mirror that could let her see out the window of Woodlawn Farm, where she lived her entire life. So a remarkable story, and this is her deliberate last poem. The final word, window thrown open to the spring. And I know from visiting her, I know that window. I know the view she had through a mirror out that window. And I also deeply respected how wonderful her poems were, all written with voice recognition software once she had that, before then dictated to family members who were constantly at her side. She seldom wrote about her condition or illness, wouldn't even know it. Most people wouldn't have even known it. But she had this incredible hardship in her life relative to the rest of us. This is a picture of her with her last book in that room where she lived nearly her entire life. And this is the last book she published just before she died. And the room, the farmhouse, is actually just to the right of the red barn in the picture. It was a very moving experience for working on a project. I'd like to come to the end of this section by returning to Japan. Some years ago, for the Hiker North America Conference in Ottawa, Ontario, one of the guest speakers was Robert Sibley, who was a spiritual writer, and he'd done the pilgrimage, the El Camino pilgrimage in Spain, and he also wrote a long series of articles for the Ottawa Citizen newspaper about the Shikoku pilgrimage around Shikoku Island, Japan, and it takes a month or two to walk around. You visit 88 temples, and they symbolize a confrontation with death. Again, that whole doctrine of Buddhism. And each of the stages as you go around the island represent different parts of progression of awareness and enlightenment and so on. And when Robert Sibley started his pilgrimage, he met Shuji Nawano, and they did the pilgrimage together. And Shuji also brought his son with him, who had severe autism. And they were doing the pilgrimage together, wearing white as a symbol of death. and many symbols to do with confronting death through the walk. And Shuji wrote haiku on his walk. And for that Haiku North America conference, I was asked to translate them into English with Emiko Miyashita. And this was 2009. And they sat around for a while, and then I discovered them again. They were used at the conference, but I found them again and decided to write an essay about present all the poems. And the significance is that they were all death haiku, because a few weeks after the pilgrimage was over, Shuji Nawano sent them to Robert Sibley. That's why we have them. And then a week or so later, Shuji Nawano chose to kill his son and to kill himself, killing his son so that the son wouldn't be a burden on his wife because of his severe disability. So Shuji Nawano completed the Shikoku pilgrimage as a deliberate last act of life and wrote 33 haiku that are preserved. The essay that I put together. And the poem you're about to see was actually the second last poem on this of this sequence of 33. The last one is about the joy of drinking beer at the last temple. So he had a sense of humor. You visit these 88 temples along the way. But this poem was written just before that. And this is also engraved on his gravestone. No more smiles on the weather-beaten Jizo, village in leaf. So it's springtime, the village is leafing out, but there are no more smiles on the weather-beaten Jizo. This is what a Jizo looks like, and it's important to know that the Jizo it looks after children. It's dedicated to protecting children and the unborn. And so it's very clearly a reference to his autistic son. And the life he had looking after his son. And although a Jizo is always smiling, for him, there were no more smiles. He was done. He had no more energy for this. And to me, it's a very sad story. But this is why this poem is engraved on his gravestone. No more smiles in the weather-beaten Jizo. Yet there's a moment of hope. Village in leaf. So to wrap up here, I have a few resources that I can share, and if you have any questions, I'll stop the screen sharing and we can talk more. So this is the book, Japanese Death Poems by Joel Hoffman, that I highly recommend. It has many editions, still in print after 30 plus years. So different covers, but this is, I think, the latest one. Highly recommend it. This is the book of Death Awareness Haiku, edited by Robert Epstein. It's reprinted in a 10th anniversary edition just a couple of years ago. Check out Time is Noon, Death Awareness Haiku. And this is a Requiem by Carl Jenkins, who incorporated a set of Joel Hoffman's, the poems from Joel Hoffman's book, the Death Haiku there, and combined it with a requiem, the classical music form, and which is, I don't know why anyone hadn't thought of doing this before, but this composer did do this. And there is a video and audio of this, but I'm going to skip that and go to this. This is something to find on YouTube. If you search for Haiku Zen Poems to Leave You Breathless, which I think is a terrible title. It's clickbait, because haiku isn't necessarily a Zen poetry, but a lot of people in the West think it is. But this is one poem from this particular video. Face to face with death, I unsheathe my sharpened sword. Blade is broken. What's interesting about this is the incredible voice that's used. And in all those samurai images, if you buy the NFT, if you there's a process that if you want to do it, you can basically roll the dice on it and see if it will become golden. And 88 of the 8,888 had the opportunity to become golden and thus more valuable. And if you did this, what was called the trial of ascension with your NFT, you could see if yours would become golden or not. But whether it did or not, you got to hear a recording of a voice saying the poem in Japanese. It's very similar to this one. I'm sorry I can't play it, but it's a really rich, resonant voice, and it's a spooky voice. And this video has a similar voice. Yeah, you could see if your poem becomes golden, your NFT becomes golden, and you will see at the end of this presentation an image of one of them that has become golden. We're almost there. The Haiku Foundation has a dialogue about death haiku, death awareness poetry. So there's a link for that, and we'll try and get that to you if you're interested. And one more of these fine fellows, and I have some parting words for you. Messiah Saito. White breath. My last day. Unknown. Which I think is true for all of us. Thank you very much.
Oh, Michael, thank you.
Thank you.
There we go.
What I'd like to do is go to gallery view, and if you all would like to, those of you that have questions, if you'd like to unmute, feel free to ask Michael a question. That was pretty wonderful.
It was very wonderful.
Yeah, right.
Suitable for this time of year, I hope.
I have a question.
Casey.
I was curious. I really liked those graphics, and there was some script to the side of the images. What does the script say?
So I have a record of all the poems translated into English. They're all waka poems. They're all death poems. They're not haiku. They thought they were haiku when they first did this. I have a record of them. So I don't know which specific one you mean. I've also been asked not to say what specific ones mean, although somebody could figure them out, because part of the process of buying the NFTs is if you go through the trial of ascension, then you get to discover what they say.
I'd be more
I'm not
inclined
supposed
to
to
buy
say.
it if it told me something I wanted to look more into.
Yeah, I haven't actually spent time looking at all the translations and comparing them with the images, because there are 8,888 images and various combinations of pieces of art and poems and calligraphy. And I've not correlated the poems to individual images. So I don't know that would lead. It's sort of, it's not random, but it's permutations. Like there are 20, you could have 20 poems and various variations of all the images that go with them. So probably all the images are associated with one poem at one point. So there isn't really a direct meaning between the poems and the image.
Thank you.
Well, Richard, thank you. And I'm so glad you made it in. That was terrific. We all appreciated it. And you know, we are past the end of our time here. I was gonna ask if anyone had work to share, but I think we'll forego that for this meeting and save it for our next Zoom meeting in January. We'll do some sharing at that meeting.
And I would like to add that people that are interested in Michael's work, his poetry and other work, he has a website that is called www.graceguts.com. So, and Grace Guts is all one word, www.graceguts.com. And I know I can tell you for sure that Haiga Adventure people have gone to that website lots of times for information about various haiku related subjects, as well as Michael's haiku. So check it out.
Dorothy, can we ask you to, in the follow-up for the newsletter, can you get the list of resources that Michael shared with us at the end of his presentation, and we can print those in the newsletter?
Yes, I can.
Great, because those were good resources, I think, for us.
I might have to email you, Michael, and be sure that I've got all the authors spelled correctly. But
Well,
Thank you
and
so much,
yeah.
Michael. Some of those poems were really stunning.
Thank
Anyway,
you.
Thank you for
Very
sharing.
rich.
moving.
Yeah.
Thank you. In the chat, I posted links to Grace Guts' site and also to the National Haiku Writing Month site. And NaHaiWriMo is the way we refer to it. That's the name on the Facebook page. And the official month is February, coming right up.
Well, thank you. Don't forget, December 6th, we're coming together in person, and watch the newsletter for all kinds of information and more information about the upcoming exhibits that are coming out. And don't forget to pay your dues if you haven't already. And that information also was in the last newsletter and will be in the next one. So with that, thank you all for hanging in today. And thank you, Michael, for a fabulous presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sally, too, and Michael, Dorothy, everyone. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And for those of you that won't be with us in December, Merry Christmas to you too, and happy holidays.
Okay.
Take care. See you later.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. I'm glad I could get this. And, I missed it at CBEC.
I'm glad you could get it too, Richard. That's great. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.